My name's Dominic Russo, and my life has been wrapped around the restaurant business for as long as I can remember. My grandparents came over from Italy to Canada in the early 1970s and opened a cozy little trattoria that quickly became a neighborhood staple. When they passed away, my parents took over and gradually expanded it, turning it into a much larger and more renowned establishment. By the time I was 15, I was bussing tables, scrubbing pots, and learning every inch of the restaurant from the ground up. As my parents grew older, they decided to retire and escape the brutal Canadian winters for Florida, becoming classic snowbirds. A few years ago, they officially sold the restaurant to me, though they kept a small percentage of the business to give them a little extra income in their retirement. Once the restaurant was mine, I was determined to modernize it and bring in a new crowd. I poured my savings and a significant bank loan into a major renovation, redesigning the dining room, updating the logo, and launching aggressive marketing. I took out ads in local and national newspapers, invited food bloggers, critics, and influencers, and spent many sleepless nights worrying I'd sunk 3 generations of my family's legacy. At first, business was painfully slow. There were weeks when I stared at the empty dining room and wondered if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. But then, as luck would have it, a semi-famous YouTuber featured us in one of his foodie videos. That exposure turned the tide. Suddenly, people were flocking to try our dishes. Reviews started pouring in online. Even on Mondays, our slowest nights, we were serving 5 to 10 times our previous customer volume. Over the next couple of years, the place became a hotspot. Celebrities began popping in, and our holiday season became so packed that people started booking tables as early as July for December. But despite all the success, I never disappeared into an office. I still worked the floor every night, wearing a sharp jacket, greeting guests, helping the staff, and sometimes even mopping the floor if it needed to be done. I wanted to stay connected to my customers and my roots. It was right in the middle of the holiday season, a time when my restaurant was booked solid, buzzing with energy, and packed with diners who'd made their reservations months in advance. On one of those hectic nights, I was stationed near the entrance, wearing my tailored jacket and greeting guests as they arrived. That's when 6 women strutted through the door. 5 of them looked like they were in their early 20s, all dressed to impress and chatting excitedly. Leading the pack was a woman who seemed a few years older, probably mid-20s, and she carried herself like she owned the place. Her name, I'd later learn, was Vanessa Brooks, though in my head, I quickly dubbed her Queen Bee Vanessa. As they approached, I overheard Vanessa telling the other girls how fabulous the restaurant was, bragging about the incredible food and hinting that they might even spot a celebrity or two. I smiled politely and welcomed them, asking, "Do you have a reservation for tonight?" Vanessa blinked at me like I'd insulted her. "Oh, we didn't make a reservation," she said with a dramatic toss of her hair. "But that's fine because I'm personal friends with the owner. He told me he always keeps a couple of tables open for VIPs like me, and he said I could have one tonight." Now, she wasn't entirely wrong that we sometimes held tables back for last-minute celebrity walk-ins. But here's the thing. I'm the owner, and I had never seen this woman in my life. At that moment, I had a few options running through my mind. I could have called her out on the spot and embarrassed her. I could have just shrugged and given her the table to avoid drama. Or I could have some fun and teach her a lesson. Given how exhausting the season had been, I was leaning toward the third option. Still, I tried to be polite first. "I'm really sorry, ma'am," I said calmly, "but we're completely booked tonight. Without a reservation, I'm afraid we can't seat you." Vanessa stared at me like I'd just told her the sky was green. She snapped her fingers at one of her friends, who pulled out her phone to take a picture of me. Vanessa announced, loudly enough for nearby diners to hear, "I'm going to talk to the owner and make sure you're scrubbing toilets by next week." The other girls jumped in with snide comments like, "Yeah, kiss your minimum wage job goodbye," and "He's just a waiter, who cares?" At that point, I realized some of them either genuinely believed Vanessa's nonsense or were happily playing along. Vanessa kept jabbing her finger at me, insisting, "Look, you can either give us a table, or I'll make your life miserable. You obviously don't know who I am." If you did, you'd be saying yes to anything I asked." I paused, took a deep breath, and decided this was going to be the third option night. I flashed my best customer service smile and said, "Of course, ma'am. Right this way." I escorted them to one of the 3 VIP tables we keep available just in case a celebrity drops in. Each of those tables typically costs a few $1,000s simply for the exclusive seating, not counting food or drinks. But I wasn't about to charge them the seating fee, yet. I told them, "Please accept my apologies for any confusion. You're right, it's much easier just to seat you. I'll even cover the first 3 rounds of drinks for you tonight." Vanessa's whole demeanor shifted. She turned to her friends, bragging, "See? Told you I know the owner," and handed me her credit card and ID. "Just for the tab," she said. From there, the night took on a life of its own. The girls started ordering fancy cocktails from our top-shelf list, premium martinis, rare whiskeys, sparkling wine from boutique vineyards. They were so focused on the free drinks that they barely realized how long the food was taking. Meanwhile, I instructed the kitchen to delay their orders just enough to keep them drinking. Every time I stopped by, they were either snapping selfies or laughing obnoxiously. They ordered 3 rounds of drinks for free, and then kept ordering more, thinking I'd keep comping everything. By the time the first plates of food arrived, mostly salads, the girls were already tipsy. Vanessa's group kept going with higher-end dishes. Our VIP menus don't show prices, a little industry secret, and the options are filled with luxuries like white truffle pasta, imported oysters, and dishes with black caviar. During the dinner, one of the girls leaned over and, in a voice dripping with disdain, asked me, "Don't you ever feel like your life is meaningless because you're just a waiter?" That was the final straw. My initial guilt about going through with my plan evaporated right then and there. From that moment forward, I was determined to make sure they'd remember this night for the rest of their lives. I kept the drinks flowing, and the group ordered even more expensive items. Behind the scenes, my staff told me the girls were laughing about how the cute waiter would always give them a table and that he was such a pushover. One even said she'd never date a waiter like that. At the end of the night, each of those girls had racked up a bill between $500 and $600 individually. When I handed Vanessa the total bill for $4,032.23, including tax and the mandatory tip for large parties, she looked like someone had smacked her across the face. Her entire vibe changed. She pulled me aside, trembling, and demanded to know if this was some kind of joke. I pretended to be confused, took the bill back, and said, "Let me check that for you, ma'am." She sighed in relief, convinced it was an error. She even called me a freaking idiot under her breath. But when I returned with the exact same total printed out again, her face fell completely. She and her friends began frantically adding up the items on their phones, realizing every drink, every dish, every bit of caviar was indeed theirs. And that, my friend, was only the beginning of Vanessa's meltdown. Vanessa was practically hyperventilating as she stared at the bill. She excused herself, muttering something about needing the restroom, and disappeared for almost 10 minutes. Part of me wondered if she was about to pull a dine and dash, leaving her friends holding the bag. But I wasn't worried. We had her credit card and her ID safely tucked away. When she finally returned, Vanessa's makeup was fresh, but her eyes were still red and puffy. She launched into a speech about how the food had been terrible, the drinks were watered down, and how she'd never been treated so poorly in her life. She demanded that I cut the bill in half, insisting her friends would help pay, even though earlier she'd loudly proclaimed she was covering the entire night. Then, like a light bulb flickering on, she pulled out her phone and tried to show me text messages supposedly from Dominic Russo owner. She claimed these messages proved she'd been promised VIP treatment and a huge discount. But the so-called texts were clearly fake. Just some contact she'd probably renamed in her phone while crying in the bathroom. I scrolled through the messages and calmly told her, "That's not my number." She stammered something about me not knowing all my own business numbers because I probably have multiple phones. I decided to end the charade. I said, "Okay, let's call this number. If the owner says it's fine to cut your bill in half, I'll do it." That's when Vanessa exploded, screaming that I'd ruined her night, threatening to blast us on social media, and claiming she'd get me fired. I leaned closer and said firmly, "Cut the crap, sweetheart. You don't know the owner. I am the owner. My grandfather built this restaurant. My family's been running it for decades. I've worked here my entire life. I've never seen you before tonight." The other girls froze, looking like deer caught in headlights. Vanessa's shoulders slumped. In the end, she signed the bill, wiping away tears, while her friends dug into their purses and handed her crumpled bills and loose change, trying to help cover the massive tab. And with that, they left, heads down, humiliated. 2 days later, while I was catching up on paperwork in my office, one of my bartenders knocked and told me an angry man was demanding to speak with me. I came out to find a middle-aged guy who looked like he'd just come from work, veins popping in his neck. Right behind him stood Vanessa, eyes downcast, arms folded tight across her chest. I brought them into my office, where I had high-quality security cameras rolling 24/7, especially in the VIP section. I played back footage of the entire night, Vanessa's entrance, her bragging, the snide remarks about my meaningless waiter life, the massive rounds of drinks, and even snippets of her friends mocking me. The audio was crystal clear. The man's face went from furious to stunned. Vanessa kept trying to interject, but he barked at her to shut up. When the video ended, he turned to her, shouting that she'd embarrassed him, that she was irresponsible and reckless. He apologized to me profusely, yanked Vanessa by the elbow, and stormed out. I never saw either of them again. For a while after, I kept the printed copy of Vanessa's $4,232.23 bill framed on my desk. It serves as a reminder that while hospitality is my business, respect is still a two-way street. A few friends asked if I felt guilty for going so far. I don't. I didn't charge Vanessa and her group for the reserved VIP seating fee itself. That alone usually costs several $1,000s just to sit there. And the first 3 rounds of drinks I gave them for free were ultimately nothing compared to what they spent on the rest of the menu. Honestly, I'd been tempted at first to let it go, but the comment from one of Vanessa's friends, that I must have a meaningless life because I only work as a waiter, lit a fire in me. There's nothing meaningless about working hard, about building something real. I suppose that's my biggest takeaway from the night. Some people think money or appearances make them superior. But the truth is, character always shows itself in the end, and sometimes it comes with a $4,000 price tag.